Modeling flash, you hit this and the flash strobes really fast for like a second. It's not very effective. Auto bracketing set. This allows you to choose what setting is varied when you're using bracketing. You can either do exposure and flash, exposure only, flash only, or white balance bracketing, which will go from cool to warm pictures. Bracketing on the D300 lets you choose up to 9 consecutive pictures. So you can bracket 9 shots, which means it'll go from very dark to very bright in increments that you choose, from 1 exposure stop at a time to a third of an exposure stop at a time. Auto bracketing for manual mode is pretty much the same thing except for when the camera's in manual mode. Bracketing order, I like to change the default so that it underexposes to normal exposure to overexpose, so that it's like when you're reviewing it, it's kind of dark to bright instead of starting in the middle. Multi-selector center button. Now this is the button that you use like a joypad on the back of the camera. By default, the center button toggles between thumbnails and image review, but what I like to do is change it so that and there's 2 modes that you use this button. It's for shooting, so that you can like change like the center focus point. So if you push it, by default, wherever the focus is, if you push the center button in the back, it will reset it to the middle position. Otherwise, the other option is to highlight the active focus point, which is kind of silly. Playback mode, so this is when you're looking at your pictures. I changed this so that I set it to zoom at high magnification, and what that does is when I'm looking at my picture, I just hit this one time and it zooms all the way in to the area that the camera focused on so that I can see full size whether or not the image was in focus. By default, like I said, this just toggles between thumbnails and full size image review, but it's very useful for me to change that so I don't have to hit zoom 5 times and then arrow over to where the focus was. You can just do it in one shot. Multi-selector. This is multi-selector meter off delay. So the little dial on the back, the joystick that I was just talking about, this controls whether or not pushing that extends the exposure meter in the camera. Otherwise the camera will go to sleep. I leave it off, which lets the camera go to sleep even when you're pushing it. Photo info playback determines whether or not you hit left or right or up and down to go to the next picture. Assign function button. This lets you choose what the little button on the front of the camera does. Assign preview button. There's another button that you can assign. They're kind of arbitrary. There's 2 ways to assign them. You can assign them so that you press them and they do something, or you can assign them so that you press them and they do something when you turn the command dial. And there's different choices for each. I like to assign the function button to be bracketing so that I can change the amount of bracketing, if any. Otherwise there's no other way to do it. You have to assign it somewhere, because I like to do HDR photographs. And then for the preview button, I leave that preview so that I can see what my exposure is if I use a high ref stop. Assign AE and AF lock button. That's the button on the back of the top, middle, back of the camera. And one little trick that I like is a lot of people blink with the pre-flash, because I don't know if you noticed, but when you take a picture with the digital camera, it fires 2 flashes very fast. The first flash is to get the exposure reading, so it knows how strong to fire the second flash. And then the second flash fires, and usually the first flash makes your subject blink. What you can do is change this from the default exposure lock to be flash value lock. And now what you do is you hit, when this is set, you compose your picture, you hit the AE/AF lock button, and what it'll do is it'll fire that pre-flash and only that pre-flash to get a meter reading. And now that meter reading is stored in memory for as long as the camera camera is metering. So for as long as you can look through the iris and the viewfinder and see that the meter is still on, that exposure reading will be in memory. And then when you take the picture, it'll fire the flash one time at the power that it needs to be at, and your subject won't have time to blink. So it's very useful for portraits when people blink from that pre-flash. And again, you choose FV lock for that. Flash value lock. And then if you want to release the flash, because now if you take a picture of something else, it's still going to have that in memory until either the camera goes to sleep or until you push the button again. So it's a toggle. You hit it once, it takes a flash reading and your flash will fire once. You hit it again and it releases, or you wait till the camera goes to sleep. As you see, mine goes to sleep pretty quick. Customize command dials. I don't really change anything in that. That's just the little knobs in the front and the back. Release button to use dial. So if you're having a hard time holding the button down and turning the dials at the same time, this will turn the button into a toggle, so that you just push it one time and now you can turn the dials. Okay, we're back to the top. That is the custom shooting menu. That was a long chapter. Let's go down now to the setup menu. It's pretty obvious. LCD brightness is pretty obvious. Clean image sensor. There's a ultrasonic motor connect to the image sensor that will vibrate the little filter in the front of it, and sometimes it'll get some of the dust off. Usually I've noticed probably about 50% of the dust comes off. If you can't get all of the dust off, I recommend a product called Dust Aid. It's a special foam tape on a stick. You stick it onto the sensor and you pull it off and it comes off with the dust. It sounds pretty drastic, but it works really well. Lockup mirror for cleaning, pretty obvious. Video mode, pretty obvious. HDMI. HDMI will let you hook up a high definition television to the screen and see real time everything that's on the screen, which works well for live view mode. World time, set the time, language, image comment. If you want image comment on all of your images, you can input that tediously here, and see how there's no, you can't get back using the left arrow key, so you just hit menu. That'll show up on all the images in the meta tags until you turn it off, and you choose to either attach the comment or not attach it. Image rotation. This will save in the metadata whether or not the camera was rotated when you took a picture. If this is off, then it'll be off for the camera as well as for other third-party software. Not all third-party software recognizes that image rotation tag, but some of the newer ones do. That way you don't have to rotate the image yourself. USB mode. There's two options: mass storage, so it acts just like a regular memory card drive, or MTP PTP. This is a special mode that allows the computer to recognize the camera as an imaging device. You need that mode on if you're going to use Nikon Capture. Dust off reference photo. If you take if you're starting to get dust, you can take a dust reference photo that you can use later on to neutralize the dark spots from the dust. However, it only works if your picture was in RAW mode. Battery info gives you some detailed information about how much battery is left on the, or how much charge is left on the battery, as well as the charging life, which is the overall life of the battery. Once it reaches 4, it recommends you to replace the battery. Image authentication. This will put a hash value on the image so that you can tell if it's been edited or not. For some reason you need proof that the image is authentic. Save load settings. This will